Okay, good morning everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you to announce one more seminar in our System Engineering Computer Department, and the series of seminar that's being organized by Professor Sabina Figueiredo, Diego Dutra, and also the group of research in the department. We today have the pleasure to receive the visit of Professor Anna Wiedemann from the University of Applied Science, Zurich. That Anna has been working in software engineering and mainly with the ideas of DevOps and all things of continuous software engineering and support of the process, the software process development. She's a lecturer, a postdoc there at the university, and it's involved in this sort of scientific research. And she's visiting Brazil. Unfortunately, she's visiting our department to discuss new collaborations and to look for new challenges and projects that could be interesting to play together. So, Anna, you are very welcome here.
Thank you.
Please, you have the stage now. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me here today and giving me the opportunity to present my presentation to the topic Achieving Product Orientation in DevOps Teams. So I work for the Institute of Business Information Systems at the Zurich University of Applied Science, which is in Switzerland, in Europe. So I'm working there for the School of Management and Law. So we are at the interface between business and IT. So in our institute, people with a business administration background are working and with an informatics background. So it's very, very mixed. So from my personal experience, I studied business in my undergraduate, and then I did my master's in IT management, and then I started working as a business analyst and went back to my PhD studies in information systems. After my PhD, I worked for a couple of years as an IT service manager. So I'm, again, moved a little bit closer to the IT part. And yeah, I was responsible for the IT operations and support of a couple of software systems. But I missed the academic world, and I decided to go back to a university. And now, as already mentioned in the introduction, I'm working as a lecturer and postdoc in Zurich. So today, I'm happy to provide you some information about IT project management and DevOps. So I'd like to give you a short introduction about DevOps, and then last month, we published a new paper, and I'd like to show you some of the results of this paper, which is also open access, and maybe there are some interesting references for you as well. So let me begin with a short introduction about my research topic. So 40 years ago, and I just talked a little bit with Claudia about that approach, the development of software was very, very different than today. So typically, companies realized that software is getting more and more important, but not everyone had a laptop or a mobile at home. So that was a completely new area. And software development projects were managed very, very different. However, software is getting more and more important. And in the 90s, people realized that. And that also the collaboration between the business and the IT section has to become closer, because the end user, so the customer typically of a software, is getting more and more important when collaborating in an organization that is working with software. So this agile way of working, this agile manifest appeared, and people realized that agile methods like Scrum or Kanban are very, very helpful in developing software. And however, as the name already indicates, agile software development methods mainly focus on the development part of the software delivery lifecycle. And there's a lot of pressure on sorry, on incumbent firms that they start to focus on the complete software development lifecycle, because organizations are still challenged to push new software features into a production environment with the help of the IT operations team, for example. And if they work with agile methods, typically they work very well in the test environment, but this final step for pushing new features to the production environment to make it available to the end user, that is still missing. And that's why more and more organizations start to implement cross-functional teams to solve that problem and to build this complete software development lifecycle in one team. However, it is not very easy if you have a big incumbent firm which has a lot of tools and technologies and different departments to restructure that organization. So this is a big challenge for IT organizations to combine these different parts of the software delivery lifecycle. And it is becoming very obvious that there are tensions and misalignments within the IT department and also with the business. And research and practice now do not know how to solve these problems, and tensions and guidelines are necessary to navigate these tensions, that there's an effective way of collaboration. And if we have a look into the information systems literature, we see there's a huge focus on IT project management and control literature. So, because the control theory typically helps to explain the behavior of people within a project, but also there it has a strong development focus again. So we try to address this problem a little bit and also combine the IT operations part. And that's why we investigate a cross-functional team like DevOps teams and try to deliver a control approach for DevOps or for cross-functional teams to give managers and the DevOps team guidelines how to overcome or at least navigate these tensions. So let me briefly introduce this DevOps buzzword. Maybe you are already familiar with that, so I keep that short. So as I already mentioned, long time ago, if software became popular, IT projects were mainly managed with the help of sequential project management approaches. For example, the waterfall method, maybe you have heard about that. But there are really, really long phases for each activity that is necessary to manage and develop a new software. Or even if you want to implement an enterprise resource planning system, it takes very, very long, sometimes a couple of years. And different phases are necessary for that. So for example, you need a long planning phase where the business analysts and requirements engineers are making concepts for the development team, so that the development team has really, really good and detailed information what to develop. And then after the development phase, it moves on to the test phase. But these phases typically do not have very well interactions. And after one phase is done, business analysts are leaving the projects and work in other areas. That's why this agile approach became popular, because people realized that the customer is getting more and more important, and it is important to show the end user and the customer new software features on a regular basis. And maybe then you want to change something in the software on the feature because the product owner or the end user is not satisfied. So this is possible due to agile software development methods. However, these short cycles typically help very much for getting closer to the business. But 2009, the Agile Manifest got popular in 2001, because researchers and practitioners met in their skiing holidays, and they gave us a lot of guidelines and agile values, and it became really, really popular. But then 2009, Patrick Dubois, a Belgian software engineer, realized that also the operations part has to become agile. So, and then they labeled this concept as DevOps. So DevOps was born then. And I define DevOps as a concept that has a cultural and a technological background. And it focuses on the tasks and skills related to a software product regarding planning, development, and operations within a cross-functional team. And typical, this cross-functional team is responsible for one software product or for one area of a software product. For example, in my case studies, I very often find that DevOps teams are responsible for an online shop. But an online shop, a web shop, has very, very different functionalities. So there was a DevOps, or there is a DevOps team for the shopping cart. And there is a DevOps team for the recommendation part. So the different areas of a web shop could be organized with the help of DevOps teams. So I try to visualize that a little bit better for you, how DevOps is working. So in the past, the different areas of business and development and operations are very, very separate. So till today, a lot of incumbent firms are working in very, very strict department structures. And we see that imaginary walls between business and IT. And even within IT, you see that there are walls, because typically the development part is not talking to the operations part. Yeah, people are developing their new software features, and if they want to have a release weekend, they give it to the IT operations part. And this is exactly the problem which DevOps want to solve. So first, with the agile software development method, the wall got a little bit blurred between business and development, and then due to DevOps, the necessary tasks within the IT department were allowed to work closer together. And that was a huge accomplishment, that organizations are realizing that that even within the IT department, that there are tensions and misalignments which need to be solved to achieve a really efficient way of delivering new software features. And you may have heard about different buzzwords like DevOps or DevSecOps. So from my point of view, these terms are individually used by each DevOps group or by each company, because some software have a great focus on security. Then maybe the organizations start implementing a DevOps team with a great security perspective. Or if your DevOps team is working with Scrum, they typically have a very strong focus to a business department. Then they may talk about DevOps, which is really focusing on business and IT. So from my point of view, it's the overall term is DevOps, or DevOps 2.0 maybe. But in general, I use this DevOps coin for every area. If we have a look into the practice area, we see that an important point is missing in DevOps if you compare it to Agile. Because if you want to implement Scrum within your company, you have clear guidelines. You have the descriptions about your roles, about the procedure, about the sprint. Everything is explained very, very well. So it's typically easier for a company or for a team to work with Scrum. The challenge with DevOps is that there is no guideline which says you need X rows and N tasks and set procedures. But what the practice is giving you is the CALMS principle. So this is not a typo. Keep CALMS and do DevOps. This is the this is like a very popular citations in DevOps, because CALMS stands for culture, automation, lean metrics and sharing. So if you're interested to implement a DevOps team, you could work with these key principles. So let me quickly introduce that to you. So culture typically stands for the focus on people, because now if you want to implement a DevOps team, you have to work with a team about 8 to 12 people, and a lot of knowledge could be missing. Because in the past, you worked in these department structures, for example, where a lot of knowledge regarding development was implemented. You have full stack developers, you have front and back end developers. And now you are in a cross-functional team with maybe 1 or 2 software developers, 1 or 2 operations people, and 1 or 2 business people. And now you have to learn all these new tasks within this limited space. So there must be a focus on the people and how to develop them and how to train the people, because this is really a challenge for organization. I mean, the focus of the learning is limited to the software product, whereas the DevOps team is responsible for. However, people need the right culture and the right attitude to work with this DevOps concept, and they should be willing to learn and to implement this DevOps culture. Automation, I think you are familiar with continuous integration and continuous delivery and all these tests that are necessary to implement when you work on software releases and software deployments. So it is very important, because the DevOps team has this limited human capacity, that you avoid manual tasks and that you identify what possible procedures and processes could be automated and could reduce your workload, that you can focus on the product and on the software itself. Then you may have heard about Lean. So Lean is went popular because Toyota, the famous automotive company, used that for building their cars. So they investigated how they could structure their processes and their production more lean, so that the capacity was reduced, the logistic was reduced to save money. And this lean thinking and these lean approaches could be applied very well in this DevOps world, because you have also this limited capacity in your DevOps teams, and you have to minimize your workload. You should not put the people much under pressure with a huge workload. People should decide what they're able to manage, and then, for example, grab new tasks at the end of the sprint if they still have time for working on more tasks. And also inefficiencies should be identified, that people can work on the really important tasks. Then metrics is a very important point in both worlds. So development and operations could be measured with the help of metrics. So in this COMS principles, it is very much focusing on the software operations point of view, because typically you investigate the infrastructure. So you implement metrics or alerts, and then you get notifications if something is going wrong with your infrastructure, or if the infrastructure is down completely, or if something is going wrong. So their metrics are very, very helpful. And the last point is sharing. Sharing is caring. This should enable people to share their knowledge, because typically a human person is very, very proud that he or she is good in one area, and that the person is the specialist in that area. And sometimes it is hard to train, to learn other people that are maybe not so good in a special area. But people in the DevOps team need to be motivated to learn from each other and to share their knowledge. And because you have to have backup strategies if people are sick or on holiday. So the people that are working at DevOps team have to compensate that. So that was a brief introduction about general DevOps topics. Now I would like to move to my research area, and I'd like to explain what I did so far, or 2 areas that I mainly investigated in the past, and I'm still working on it. So we see 2 theoretical foundations in the area of DevOps that are very helpful to explain the concept. So the first one is the alignment theory. So not only from a business IT alignment perspective, also from an operational within IT point of view, it's very interesting to investigate DevOps. So because as I already mentioned, and I will show that to you on the next slide, there is an internal misalignment between software operations and software development. So we put forth the following research question: what are the mechanisms by which software development and operations people achieve alignment? So what is necessary that alignment within the IT can grow and can be realized? On the other hand, after we found out how can alignment within the IT department be achieved, we thought, well, now we have the guidelines for the DevOps team, but how can a DevOps team succeed? What can a manager do to have a high-performing DevOps team and to overcome the challenges in that area? Because also developers and operations people have very, very different control approaches, which I will explain in a couple of minutes to you. So these were the 2 theories. So alignment on the one hand is defined as the degree to align structure, processes, and skills with the other part, and control, which is defined as the individual behavior. So influencing the individual behavior by a controller or by a project manager to achieve the aims and goals of the organization. So let me start with the IT alignment point of view. Here you see the very prominent model from Henderson and Venkatraman from 1993. It's a simplified representation of that theory. So the gray part here is focusing on the strategic business IT alignment point of view. So here, the scope, the competencies, and the governance mechanism should be aligned with each other. So business and IT should be aligned. It depends on the company. So if you have a very strong technology focus, so if you're a technology leader like Microsoft or OpenAI, I'm pretty sure they are following an IT-focused strategy. But if you want to sell a business-oriented product or a car, or if you're a bank, you may have a business strategy. However, since software is getting more and more important for a bank and for insurance, IT is becoming more important and must be aligned with the business. So this goes hand in hand. So the one hand cannot exist with the other hand today. And here we see the strategic point of view. However, a strategy can only live and grow if the operational part is also aligned. So here we see the operational alignment view, which is focusing on business infrastructure and IT and process infrastructure. And this area focus on more the daily business, on the operational perspective, with structure, processes, and skills that need to be aligned in both worlds. So from business and IT. And if you achieve alignment on the operational perspective, then you are also able to achieve alignment on the strategic level, or you can live the strategy in your operational daily business. But then we did a little brainstorming session, and we came to that point that in DevOps, even within the IT department, there is a misalignment. So you cannot achieve operational alignment if your IT is not aligned. So how can you achieve a business orientation if you have problems within your own IT function? And it became very, very clear that there are conflicts between operations and development. For example, development is focusing on new software features. These are very important. Innovation must be provided very fast to the end user. And on the other hand, operations teams are saying, no, please don't change a running system. We are happy that we don't have a problem, because if we don't have problems, we have less work. And there are many, many more differences and misalignments between this. So we started a research and investigated how DevOps teams are solving that misalignments with the help of the IT alignment theory. And we built, with help of grounded theory, a model that is showing now how IT alignment is achieved in within a DevOps team, within the IT organization. So on the left side, we have this internal IT misalignment. And in the middle, you can see our tripartite intra-IT alignment mechanism. So the concept that we derived from our case study were integrated responsibility, individual compensation, and multidisciplinary knowledge. And here you can see our mechanisms that are supporting that concepts. And then you realize pretty fast that these mechanisms and themes are related to the IT business theory, because integrated responsibility focuses on processes. So with the help of these mechanisms, the process alignment between development and operations is achieved, because we found, for example, that the agile way of working should be extended to IT operations. That also IT operations people are now included to the daily stand-ups. That they are saying, look, we have a bug or software defect that needs to be fixed. So we have this agile extensions, for example, which is changing the processes within the IT, within the DevOps team. And then the individual componentization is focusing on the infrastructure part of the IT alignment model. And for example, it is recommended by our case study to have an infrastructure that enables, for example, silent releases. So maybe cloud infrastructure and containerization enable a lot of individual work. And silent releases are, for example, very important if you have a web shop. So you're buying a product on Amazon and you don't want to have a downtime. So if you click on the buy button, it should work. So I never realized that there's an outage on Amazon or on Spotify. That's why or that's the reason why Amazon and Spotify, they are doing silent releases. The releases are so small that the end user is not realizing it. Even if there is a deployment, the infrastructure is enabling that. And the last point is the multidisciplinary knowledge. It is addressing the skill part of the IT alignment model. And it just says that the skill enhancement and the distribution of skills within the IT team should be enabled. So here we see that this is now enabling this internal IT alignment is now enabled through these different concepts. Good. So then, as I already mentioned, this is also, I will share the link with you later. This is an open access publication. If you're interested, you can have a look into that as well. So after we defined these alignment mechanisms, we started to have a look into the control area, because now we know we can achieve alignment within the IT, but now we want to overcome the tensions in control, because still the behavior of the individuals need to be adapted. Yeah. In control literature, the information systems area, control is defined as the attempt to ensure that an individual is working on an organizational project which is in line with the strategy to achieve a certain outcome or a certain aim. And if you have a look into information systems literature, 4 control topics became very, very obvious. So they got famous from Wiener and Kirsch. These papers are excellent control examples. And let me explain that to you a little bit. So the first control theme we identified is the control effects. So control effects focus on the performance of a project. So typically you want to achieve a software product in a high quality or in a very, very efficient way because maybe you want to save money. So these are control effects that can be managed. Therefore, the control choice is very important because this refers to the control mode that is chosen by an IT project manager or the controller of an IT project. So you can choose a mode, for example, that has a focus on the behavior. So behavioral mode because you want to influence the behavior of the individuals. Or you want to focus on the outcome of an IT project. Imagine you have unlimited budget, unlimited time, then you may want to have a really, really great outcome. Or you have to focus on the input. So maybe you have time restrictions, budget restrictions. So as a project manager, you are under pressure to manage the input. So you are choosing an input-oriented mode of working. So there are different control choices for an IT project manager that need to be made before the project starts, which are dependent from the context, from the project tasks and so on, and the project size. Then the third theme we found is control context, so control context in information systems literature refers to the project itself. So project can have different size and different tasks, and they have different stakeholders. So typically, the person who is paying for a product has a very important opinion which should be considered from the IT project manager. So the context really varies a lot between software in software development projects. And then the last point we identified as control dynamics. So in IT project management, typically the phases are changing. So the control can change if you have a planning phase or if you have a development phase or a further development phase. And typically the control of the manager, the control styles, then also changes and adapts a little bit. So therefore, we realized that, again, here we have the strong information systems development focus, because every of this topic and every literature that we found has a very, very strong software development focus. And then what we did based on this themes, we also did an investigation in the operations part. So we did an in-depth search in the IT operations literature and try to map IT operations literature to the control themes. So the control themes were given by the literature, and we tried to identify also the operations part. So for example, effects in IT operations are, or control effects are measured with the help of service level agreements. So this is a huge difference if you compare it to software development. So in an IT operations world, you are measured by service level agreements, which are typically response time. How fast is my IT operations member responding to a ticket? Yeah, this could be a service level agreement. Yeah, or how fast the software defect was fixed. Excuse me. Then from a control choice point of view, it's okay. I'm almost done. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I will make it. European people are not used to air condition. So from a control choice point of view, also here there's a huge difference, because on the one hand we have the control modes that I explained to you. On the other hand, the choices differ because IT operations work with ITIL, IT infrastructure library. So you have very, very clear guidelines how to manage an incident, how to manage a problem, how to manage a change. So there's less room for flexibility. It's very, very strict. You cannot choose easily in which mode you want to go. So this is a huge difference. And also the context differs. Development is very, very used to work in this project area, whereas IT operations has the strong end user and stakeholder focus. So they start working when a problem appears, very, very reactive. And so there's not much room for a context because they're used to work in huge departments or support centers or in infrastructure. It's very, very different from a control perspective. And the last point are the dynamics. So typically, dynamics in IT operation just appear if you have a huge infrastructure change, or if a new technology is implemented. Then typically IT operations people are under pressure, and they have to change their knowledge and they have to adapt their skills a little bit. In general, they are seeking for stability of the software, so less changes. And hence, it was obvious that there are tensions between these two areas. And the tension is typically defined as a stress or an anxiety. You may know that from your personal life. If you have a tension in you, you are very, very stressed. And this is influencing your work and how you make a choice regarding a decision. So based on that findings from the literature that we saw, we started to identify these tensions or we named tensions, 4 tensions. So method discomfort, goal conflict, decision right, and time rhythms. That were the tensions between software development and software operations. And that's why we talked to a lot of different companies that have successfully implemented a DevOps team, because we wanted to find out how they solve this control tensions. But let me quickly introduce their tensions to you. So we have that 4 tensions. The first one is the goal conflict. And it became very, very obvious, I already mentioned that to you, that there are differences in speed and stability. So the goal of a software developer is to provide new software features to the end users. The goal of an IT operations person is to have stability. Less changes. So this is a goal conflict between the two. Then we have the method discomfort. So IT development is used typically to work within projects, to work with agile methods. So agility is becoming a standard in software development. So most of business critical software is managed with agile methods. On the other hand, IT operations have a very, very strong focus on a structured way of working, for example, with the help of ITIL. So it's very, very structured. There you have best practice approaches, and they don't want to fail. Developers are learning by failures, and the operations teams don't want to fail at all. Then we have the decision rights. Developers are managed by project managers. IT operations is managed by IT service managers. Complete different way of management. A service manager typically does not use any project management guidelines. Service managers are trying to work with SLAs and KPIs can also, of course, work in the development area, but they are very, very different. And the time rhythm is the last tensions that we identified. So on the one hand, development is very short-term oriented, to have very, very often changes. And IT operations has a long-term orientation because they have a very clear definition how a change must be managed. And this is typically a very, very long procedure. So, as I already mentioned, I'm a qualitative researcher, and if you're interested in conducting a case study, I can really recommend some of these papers and books here. We used for analyzing our data, so we had several cases, and we conducted 21 interviews, I think in 6 different cases, and we analyzed that with the help of grounded theory. And therefore, I can currently recommend the Gioia paper. This paper is really giving a good storyline how to structure a qualitative paper and how to analyze qualitative data on a very, very helpful way. So in this paper, we started our coding along the tensions that we a priori identified. So we had the 4 tensions, and then I went through all the transcripts and coded along how the tension was addressed. So I didn't say that to my interview partner, how have you solved the goal conflict? I tried to avoid this topic. So I wanted to find out how they achieved a successful development team. And we found for every tension that we a priori identified, we found a lot of codes. So typically open coding, the first order concept that is named by Gioia, these first order concepts is the spoken word. So we adapt that a little bit, that it's fitting into this graphic, but typically this is the spoken word. And with the second order concepts, you try to structure a little bit the open coding section, that you summarize that to an overarching issue. And then the aggregated dimension, which are these 3, are representing the relationships between several second order concepts. So then you have really a dimension which is explaining the relationships. And these aggregated dimensions, we had 3 in this paper, are addressing the tensions that we defined. So we have the first dimension, which is participation in shared vision, So a DevOps team should enact a common view of a shared vision. So the strategy that's defined in the business alignment, for example, that should be very clear to the DevOps team, but they have to work on a vision that is suitable for their software product, and that's in line with the company strategy. And therefore, these mechanisms can help consensus, automation, restructuring. And we have the right of co-determination, which says that a DevOps team need to take over a lot of responsibility regarding the software product to make joint decisions along the software delivery lifecycle. So decisions regarding the software delivery lifecycle must be made by the team. Of course, sometimes decisions are expensive, so it might be helpful to have some governance mechanisms from the management to have a little mechanism for the team to be in line with the company regulations. And the last dimension that we identified is a common sense of duty. Here we see that the ownership and the leadership is changing a lot. So DevOps is moving away from this command and control leadership style toward a more consensual way of working, transformational leadership. So a more enabling leadership that people can develop the Scrum principles, for example. And this is our control model that we derive with the help of grounded theory. We see the 3 dimensions, our mechanisms, and the mechanism that addresses the tensions that we developed from prior literature. So grounded theory is typically used to develop new theory, but you can also apply grounded theory if you want to build up on an existing theory, like I do with control. And a paper from Vichy et al. is very, very well. If you're interested, I can share that with you. It's explaining that there's also partial grounded theory. So that, for example, a grounded model is also a contribution with the help of grounded theory. Good. To sum up, of course, this research has some limitation and there's a lot of room for further collaboration. So the first one is, since I'm doing qualitative research, I think we need success and failure metrics. So can we really have numbers how successful a DevOps team is? And I think, therefore, we might need quantitative methods to get more insights into that. Maybe we can build up on my prior research and investigate that with a survey study. Then on the other hand, there's a great focus on inter-organizational work as well, because a lot of DevOps teams are implemented with the help of a service provider or a software provider. And this changes the view of my investigation a bit, because if you have a consultancy firm which is helping you with your DevOps team or bringing people inside, then we don't have this intra-IT phenomenon. We have two different companies that are working together, and this may change the alignment view and the control view a lot. So how can you handle that? And DevOps can be helpful for a lot of products, but there's much room for working with sequential methods or agile methods in the future. So it could be very, very interesting when control in DevOps is applicable for which products, because I don't think that every product is suitable for DevOps. So I think that's it. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Very nice. I think we can turn on the lights here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And for the audience in the YouTube, I'm sorry that we are not able to share the full screen for you, but it's a sort of interoperability issue among three different computers here.
Next time I bring my Mac.
I don't know, but if you can share these slides with us.
I think I already sent it, yeah.
We can put it together in there.
Of course, happy to share that.
By the way, so we have time for questions. For those that are in YouTube, please write down the questions in the chat. And then if someone here can see the chat and tell the questions, Jerry is going to do that. Okay, here, Professor Geraldo Chechel, please.
Thank you for the talk. It was very good. I work in projects with the industry. I teach software engineering in the undergrad and do software engineering for games. It was very nice to see what you talk. But I have some. Then there's a technical question. It's how mature was this these development groups and these operational groups that you talk to? If they have same I, if they have I2, because I see that, for example, in Rio, you talk of a lot of companies that they ask their operations to have I2, and they ask nothing for the development. They have to do whatever they have to do, although we have CMMI and a Brazilian version that is MPS.
Okay, interesting.
So what was the typical profile of the companies that you talked to?
Okay, maybe I repeat the question. So what was the typical profile of my DevOps cases, I think? So yeah, we did a research typically online to find companies that already working with DevOps teams. And I could only do the interviews if the DevOps teams already exist for minimum 6 months. The longer, the better. So it was very, very important that they focus on one group and that they say, yes, that's the DevOps concept we are working. Sometimes I had to exclude cases because they just said, yeah, we are working with Agile, but we want to implement the ops part, so I cannot use it as a DevOps case. So typically I was not talking to development and to operations separately. I was really searching for DevOps and how the work was changing, and typically it changed a lot. So operations people had to learn a lot of different ways of working, and also developers had to take over PagerDuty. So they are not used to that at all, and there were big differences for the people, and they had to work on that. So that was really, really exciting.
They have certified teams on ITIL, on CMMI,
they are still using it, and it is still the case that a lot of companies in my investigation I've typically these companies were established firms, big old companies. So of course they still have a help desk, they still have the idle processes, but for business critical software and for implementing like these little ecosystems with the help of cloud platforms, they see that idle comes to a border. So you cannot use idle if you want to fix problems very, very fast. That's why they sometimes build a parallel world. So they have this business critical software development teams managed by DevOps, and they have their old world managed with classic ITIL and IT project management. So, and I think you have to make a decision in your company if you want to move completely to DevOps. I think this is possible, that you restructure your complete organization towards this DevOps way of working, or you want to have this two-speed IT or bimodal IT, where you have two worlds, the fast and the DevOps world and the normal stable running world, because this could be very suitable for old software and all technology that you still need in your company, and it's very, very important that this is working well. So you have to decide, do we really need to change that? Do we really need to change core systems that are running good and stable? Would be an interesting research question for the future.
Yeah, very nice. More questions? Yeah, please go.
You talked about that it's hard to find measurements, like any metrics to actually verify whether or not the project was successful or not in DevOps. But before that, you said that you try to kind of focus your research on finding out what actually worked when you research DevOps teams. So my question is, what kind of metric did you use then to actually see what the successful teams were? And if you have any ideas for the future, what these metrics could be?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. So if you look into books and research, you find a lot of metrics, for example, mean time to repair and outage time. So these are the metrics that every DevOps team can measure, or you can measure your infrastructure outage and so on. However, I cannot find till today, but maybe you can help me. I cannot find a research where the money, the value is depicted. So I want to know if it's really a benefit from a monetary point of view to implement DevOps. So you have to spend a lot of money to implement DevOps teams, but when do you have the return on investment for that? So this is what I mean with failure and success. So is that really a suitable approach for companies to have all that effort and all this restructuring in your companies? And do you see the value for that later? And how can this value for the company be measured? So these are not the typical metrics that we measure in DevOps teams. This is more from an organizational point of view.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
All right. More questions? Please. So Rafael now.
And I also researched in software engineering.
Yeah.
The research topics are correctly the social technical aspects
Mhm.
of teams to work. So I see many opportunities for collaboration. Thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting. All those topics. I have many questions. I try to at least one, two. Okay. Regarding the team, the question about the team, I'm curious about to which extent the dev part maybe consider agile, right? When you survey this team, 30 people, to which extent you understand they apply agile practices, setting on it's like continuous integration, for instance, daily meetings and so on.
So the question was, how should we change the development, or
How they typically work? It's team that you
They're real agile.
They are really agile.
yeah, most in my research, most of my cases told me that they are working with agile methods and they start implementing the operations part. So they are now working together in the stand-ups. They leave room in their backlogs for unplanned work, that you don't have to wait for the next sprint or for a bug fixing sprint, which is very often the case, that users are blocked from working because there's a defect. And now the big advantage of DevOps is that they're leaving room for this unplanned work, and they can fix it fast because they have the necessary components in the team. And also the IT operations part becomes way more important because they're saying, look, yesterday we had 10 calls regarding this bug. It's getting really important. We cannot wait 4 weeks. So please prioritize that. But also I had teams that worked with no agile method. And typically this is the case if your customer or the end user is not from business. So also for infrastructure, you can use DevOps, and then typically your client are the developers or the software provider, Microsoft. And then you may not need an agile method because you don't need a real product owner. You just have to run the software. So I think that both is working, but most of my cases say that they benefit working with Scrum or Kanban.
More questions?
Okay. No, it's a previous topic that said we're talking about how to measure the value for the company.
Mm-hmm.
Can we not use the outage frequency and durations as a fact? Because coming from system computer architecture, the two cases that come to my mind is from Amazon.
Yeah.
A really old one based on their database that was unable to handle the request, and a more recently on their cloud computing system that, because of misconfiguration, causes an outage in one of their zones. So it's a problematic, or you think it's feasible to use, not as direct measure, but as a part of your metrics, the outage duration and frequency to try to grasp the value for the company of DevOps.
So okay, the question was, can you measure value with the help of outage? I think. Thank you. Yeah, that's an excellent idea, I think, because typically you can measure the time various people cannot work and users are not able to use with the software. And you know how many end users typically are working because you can check that on your metrics. But it's hard to say how many people would have bought something during that time. So, but of course you can have a rough idea, yeah.
Try to grasp based on you have
Yeah.
I'm serious. In the past, you can.
But yeah, I would be pleased to find a company who can share that information with me. because typically, if you want to talk about money, it's becoming a little bit different. So I'm always saying how much has it cost to implement this DevOps team, and it's really, really hard to get figures. So I don't have a good comparison, so I cannot give a valid answer to that. But this is why I think this you can measure it exactly. This is what we need, I think, to see. Do we see a benefit if we measure outage, and if we see if it's reducing after we have DevOps?
One of the things that was thought through your presentation, it is as I said, operation teams like stability. However, one of the interesting things when you talk about stability is stability is a problem because you are stable for a long time. Once it breaks, it takes a long time to go back. So we have all those war games that break all the times. That's plan breaks, so we are able to find errors and avoid long outages. So there is this trade-off on intentions, as you said, in the systems that are quite interesting.
Yeah, it breaks one of the soft evolution laws. So if you have this software stable for a long time, something.
No, war games are the best thing in the world. You should try to break. We don't try to break our system to verify if it's stable or not.
Yeah. One more, the last one.
During all your talk, you were always bordering stakeholder theory and maybe stakeholder capitalism. How do you see that?
From a organizational science perspective, I think that would be very, very good. Institutional theory, stakeholder theory could be a next step. So this is an excellent idea. Thank you very much. So especially since I'm now working for School of Management. So I did my PhD at Technical University in Munich, but now I moved to the School of Management. They might would see that very, very well if I go with stakeholder in the future.
a very short.
Okay.
One thing that I really enjoyed in your research that you apply theoretical backgrounds to
Mhm.
support to bridge this research gaps.
Mhm.
You talked about the control theory and the alignment theory. Have you ever considered applying some theory from social psychology, for instance, to understand better the collaboration between groups?
I think these, so thank you for the question. I think these, we are social researchers in information systems, and these theories are coming a little bit from the psychological part of view. So yes, I'm always interested in new theories and new phenomenons that are helping. So for example, in my PhD, I looked a little bit at that's a hard word, punctuated equilibrium. So it comes from biology. Sorry, I was talking too much. And we can always use theories from different parts, which are very helpful for us to explaining our phenomenons. And I think it's a great benefit, and we should look more across the border. So I should look more not only in information systems literature, but also in sociology. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a quick curiosity.
Oh my goodness.
It's just because you were saying that the teams use cloud infrastructure.
Mhm.
I was wondering if any
Most of them.
So some of them using premises.
On premise, exactly.
And did you see any differences in the?
Typically, they have scaling problems, and not. So I had 2 cases from. I think I had over 20 DevOps teams, but 2 cases worked on premise. And typically, as a team member, you have to write an assignment to the manager, like, oh, I want to have more storage, and then it's getting back, why? It costs so much, and it's taking a very, very long time that you get the storage. And with clouds and a service provider like Microsoft, AWS, you can scale for Black Friday, for example, because you need more performance for your web shop. And then after Black Friday, you can reduce it again, and then you save money again. And this is convincing very, very often the management from a monetary point of view. And I think this is working well. But if you are a technology-oriented company, I also had this public cloud phenomenon where they have on-premise in their basement. So this is working. It's not, it's working, but maybe we should focus more on-prem again. Maybe for security, for DevSecOps, this is very interesting to work with on-prem. Thank you.
Okay, we approach the end of the presentation. It was a really, really nice talk, and I enjoy all the things, and mainly the last slides that when you mentioned that DevOps is not a silver bullet.
We also have to be critical.
This is really good, and we need to understand much better all these technologies and see how we can improve the software process, because we are back to the control of the software process development and deployment and operations
and test.
Thank you so much for all of you in YouTube and here. And let's give a big hand to Anna.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, YouTube.